Okay, cool. Welcome to Social Studies. Thanks for coming out. I'm Carlton Hargrove, the editor of Civic Loafing. It's my first one, so yeah, I was not here, so I didn't complete passing. But I'm kind of new to the role of editor at Creative Loafing, so I started in January, so this is my first time at bat. But thank you for coming out. Appreciate that.
So we're doing most of y'all this evening. We're going to be doing this on Facebook Live quickly, so if you have friends and not 10, let them know. We're available for them to see. For those of you who made it out, thanks a lot. So we want to talk about this topic because it's been in the news a lot lately, especially the past couple of months. We're talking about immigration, immigration law, things that are happening to our neighbors that are documented or not. So we thought it was probably a good time to have a discussion about it, to get rid of some of the myths, and talk about what's actually going on, and people are interested in what they can do to get involved.
Yeah, I do want to say part of this event kind of spun out of a cover story that we published a few weeks ago. John Davis, the photographer, photo editor for Creative Loafing, actually wrote and shot all the shots. And they talked about, this one actually focused on dreamers. But we delved into a lot of issues around being undocumented and life like that, and the laws and policies. So this kind of spun out of that. We actually have some people from the story here today. In this piece, they talk about their lives from just their own point of view. So we actually have some here today, so they'll fill you in a little bit more when the time arises.
Alright, so to get started tonight, we just want to walk through a couple of slides to kind of set the tone on some facts and stuff that's going on. I will go ahead and preface that I'm not an immigration expert. So if any of our panelists tonight have issues with any of the stats we show, feel free to say them. We pull the stuff the best we can, but we'll leave it to the experts to give all the actual great information. So what's going on with immigration, particularly in Georgia and Atlanta, because that's our backyard. So this map is kind of showing where people who are immigrants live in Atlanta. So you can see they are everywhere. There's a lot of them kind of up in that northeastern quadrant, and they come from all over. So there's a lot of myths about what it means to be immigrants are coming from. So there's a lot of, in general, people from other countries that live in Atlanta and call it their home. They also are, stats show that disproportionately they own their own businesses, so there's a lot of folks adding to our economy. So the biggest thing for tonight is really we want to talk about undocumented immigrants, because that's really what's been in the news lately. Between 2009 and 2014, the number of undocumented people in Georgia actually declined. So you can see here the orange places are where there's been a decline in the population. Green represents where the population has increased in the last few years. Unauthorized immigrants, which is another term that some folks are using, comprise 3.9% of the state's population, about 400,000 people in 2012. 2012, it was also estimated that undocumented immigrants comprise only 7% of Georgia's workforce. So there are people here that think there's a misconception that they're taking care of a lot of needs, taking care of these jobs. That's really just not true. So in 2014, you listed Atlanta they're questioning someone who is stopped or committed or being suspect of committing a crime. So this is even really small infractions. They can ask you about immigration status. So it also imposed a prison sentence for up to a year and fines up to $1,000 for people who are knowingly transporting undocumented immigrants if they were caught committing some type of crime. And it also had some heavy fines for people who were using fake identification papers, borrowed identification papers to get a job. So up to $250,000, which I don't know about you, but I don't have that. The next big thing has been around education policy in Georgia. So since 2011, our Board of Regents has actually banned undocumented students from attending their top universities and prohibited them from qualifying for in-state tuition. So if they manage to get to college, they can't get in-state tuition. Out-of-state rates or out-of-state tuition they are ridiculous. The Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, upheld this decision a couple of years ago, and then this year in the state legislation, there's actually a bill on the governor's desk that would stop state funding for any university in the system in Georgia that was claiming to be a sanctuary campus. So that is something that's still active, as far as I know, they haven't signed it. It's possible. So that's an active piece of legislation that may or may not get signed. But would reduce state or stop state funding to universities so they start talking about sanctuary campuses. And then we get 287B. So this one comes up a lot. This is a federal item, and it allows local law enforcement to work in partnership with ICE to be able to get delegated authority to be able to enforce immigration law. Currently, ICE has agreements with 37 law enforcement agencies in 16 states. So of this, there are 4 agencies in the state of Georgia that are actually using this, which means police officers can be delegated to actually help ICE with deportation and other immigration enforcement. So those are Cobb County, Gwinnett County, Hall County, and Loafing County. So all of those are actually using this piece of federal legislation, which does come with some perks to assist ICE. So what is this to the city of Atlanta? So we did ask the city to be here this evening. They were unable to attend. They sent us some information. So HB7 is the state law, so cities can't really not follow it. They don't have no other choice. The city of Atlanta does not have an official policy on HB7 on books. They've been looking at an official policy, but they have made public statements to local law enforcement not to check documents and to other things that you're supposed to be doing with this. The Board of Regents, also not really a city item because it has no jurisdiction over any universities that are in our city limits necessarily, but they have given public statements in support of DACA students and DACA enrollment. The city is also actually employing a couple of DACA students in their internship program. So they've been a little bit of an active supporter of these students being able to access education here in Georgia. And for 287G, this is an optional program, but City of Atlanta does not participate in this program. So other things to think about, we get a lot of questions, or we put this event out without a lot of questions, so why don't people just obviously this is a question of people. So currently in the Atlanta Immigration Court, so where you might go to change your immigration status to see this item, it has a 2% approval rate in 2016 for people who are seeking asylum. So let's compare it to nationally. If you ended up in a different asylum court, there's a 43% approval rate. So they're only approving 2% of people who show up to court and say, I need asylum, I need changing status to stay in the United States, versus other places which are a lot more high. This rate has been falling for many years. It became a high watermark in 2009. It was around 25%. So still much lower than places in the country. So the big show up to immigration court to then do something with their status, because we know that they should present the rate not very likely to want to go there to try and get it. The other thing that I should cover is some quick definitions. The word, obviously, there's like undocumented immigrants. There's a lot of misconceptions around immigrants. So, the federal government is looking at who wants to be here permanently, and those people are looking for lawful permanent residents or green cards to stay here. Versus people who might just be coming here to visit, maybe they're on travel, they get some other type of visa. So, if you're a legal immigrant, there's a visa immigration system. Visa availability actually really varies between the country. Some countries and areas need a lot more visas than others. Those with direct U.S. family ties and work sponsorship, or even seeking refugee or asylum, are supposed to get preferential treatment. Someone who's just showing up. None of those things. They still have really limited access to visas. So the estimate from the federal government for 2017 for the waiting list is 4 million people around the world waiting for a visa in the United States. They're actually on the waiting list. Next thing, undocumented. So generally, you're talking about undocumented immigrants, right? It's going to be those who do not have current immigration documents. So this can be for a lot of reasons. They might not have received any immigration visas before coming to the United States. They might have come here on a valid visa or saved that visa for various reasons. They might have come and actually applied for asylum and might just be some kind of pending status or even denied status. So there's a lot of reasons someone might be undocumented. Other terms that you've heard a lot that you might want to talk about is sanctuary. So this is not, it's not an official sanctuary status. It's not something some sort of a sanctuary. But it's really looking at cities, counties, and schools that are using this term as a way to expressly say they're not going to cooperate with federal agencies on deportation of undocumented immigrants. And then this evening, we'll also be talking about people who return to DACA. So in 2012, there was the Obama-era program looking to provide temporary status to undocumented immigrants and also places children. So it's renewable every 2 years. It gives you a free deportation for those who have entered the country as children. It's a similar way, say, for dreamers, which usually is referring to someone who has DACA status. And we use the term welcoming. So this term is something that's being promoted by Welcoming America, which is a national nonprofit. So they'll be creating programs and guidelines to help cities and other communities actually create a welcoming atmosphere for immigrants. So trying to look at this sanctuary, which is unofficial, but a lot of people are using as welcoming, which is now becoming something official status, certified for a nonprofit, being something a little bit different. So with that, I'm going to write up we have 2 different sets of speakers this evening. So we actually have 3 folks. I've read the Loafing story. We have 3 folks from the story who are going to come up, share their experiences and their thoughts this evening. And then we have a few local experts as well who are going to talk through some of these things. So we're going to get that history.
So my name is Raphael. I'm a student at Civic University. University is kind of a pathway between high school and college for undocumented students. It kind of helps guys to find colleges that accept us and find scholarships that, yes, and find scholarships that apply to us as undocumented students.
Hey everyone, can you hear me okay? Alright, my name is Raymond Partolan. I'm also undocumented and a DACA recipient. I graduated from Mercer University down in Macon back in 2015, and I double majored in political science and Spanish, and I minored in criminal justice, and now I currently serve as the program associate at Asian Americans Advancing Justice here in Atlanta, and we are a nonprofit organization that serves Asian immigrants and refugees across the Southeast.
So I think first, kind of share the audience, what are the biggest misconceptions about being a doctor and being a doctor? Your thoughts on it?
All right, so I guess I'll kick us off then. So I think that I want to highlight two of the biggest misconceptions about the undocumented community as a whole. First of all, the first one I'm going to mention, I think I'm going to spend a little bit less time on, but there is this misconception across the monolithic. When people hear the words undocumented or DACA recipient, or when people think about immigrants in general, they think about Latinos, people from the Hispanic community, and as you saw in that pie chart just a couple of minutes ago, the reality is that immigrants, undocumented immigrants, DACA recipients, they come from all over the place. For example, here in the state of Georgia, there are about 51,000 Asian American undocumented immigrants, or about 13% of the total population of undocumented immigrants. So that is one. And then the second misconception that I want to touch on is, and this was alluded to earlier, there is this sense that if you are undocumented, that you can just apply for citizenship. One of the main questions that I get all the time is, Raymond, why don't you just apply for citizenship? You've been here for so darn long, and you're as American as every single one of us, so why not just apply for your citizenship? But the reality is, you can't. Unless you fall into one of those categories that Melanie alluded to earlier, you just cannot apply for lawful status here in the United States. And let me make one thing clear, DACA does not provide a pathway to citizenship. It is a temporary, DACA is an executive program that grants temporary lawful presence to those people that qualify. So, the last thing I'll say is that there are 4 ways to legally immigrate to the United States. You can either immigrate through your family, you have to fall under some kind of family category. You can immigrate through some kind of business process. If you are a skilled worker or an unskilled worker, and there's particular quotas that have to be met. Thirdly, you can come in as a refugee, or you can already be here in the United States and request asylum. And number 4, there's this thing called the diversity visa lottery, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a lottery, and you can only come forward and be a part of the lottery if you come from particular countries that are not adequately represented here in the United States.
Raymond, biggest misconceptions. Can everyone hear me? Hello? Yeah. So Raymond made a lot of really good points. I can talk from personal experience as a student, some of the stuff that I faced. So I didn't find out that I was undocumented until after high school, until I started applying for all of this. And then I was like, oh no, I can't really apply to any places here in Georgia. Even applying to Amazon College, they accepted me as an international student. And at that time, DACA didn't even exist. And so, some of my struggles is that FAFSA is not eligible for us. You can't apply for any federal student aid, post-scholarship, can't apply for post-scholarship. And I was a pretty good student in high school. Health insurance, you can't apply for health insurance, although you are required to have health insurance in college. And so I was required to have international health insurance, double the amount as a in-state or as a resident student. You're not allowed to work as a student in college, and so there are a bit of struggles here. Even if you're allowed to go to college, you still have to support yourself financially.
Yeah. So going off of what Civic was saying is as undocumented immigrants, we don't meet the requirements to apply for a lot of government aid for us, like scholarships that are offered by the state, different types of healthcare programs, and other things that she was speaking about. But also, as undocumented immigrants that work in the state, we are required to pay taxes, and that's another very big misconception that people have about undocumented immigrants, is that we come here and we work, we don't pay taxes. That's just incorrect, that's a lie. I can say from personal experience, but also from all the undocumented people that I know, is that we pay taxes, and we actually pay into the Social Security fund without ever being able to withdraw from it. And so, in a sense, we have been keeping the Social Security fund alive for these last couple of years.
So I think you touched on a little bit your story of applying for college, but is there a particular story or instance that you think from your own personal experience as well, you think really highlights some of the struggles that people face?
Yes. So I can tell you more about some of the financial struggles in college, because in my sophomore year of college, my brother and my father were actually in vacation. So it was just my mom and I and my two younger siblings. My two younger siblings are actually citizens here. So my brother and I, the eldest, we're on DACA. And so I had to start working at night. I worked at Dunkin' Donuts at night, and then I worked as a biology tutor while I was attending classes at Scott. And we couldn't afford to pay for my last semester of college, and so I started taking on more classes. I said, okay, my parents' dream was for me to get an education here in the US, and I'm going to complete this no matter what. And so I ended up graduating a semester early, December 2014, magna cum laude in neuroscience. So, and there's another aspect to that. So we're allowed to travel under certain conditions and through advanced parole. And as a student, I was going to apply for this. Okay, there was an opportunity for any Arkansas student to apply for a grant. And this was a $10,000 grant for one student. And we were going to make a project that was involving peace anywhere around the world. What we were going to do with a $10,000 grant. So I offered that I would go to Pakistan, where my parents are originally from, and help open up a computer lab in a small school instead of a library. And so I think about 20 students applied at my college. And I didn't just, honestly, when I was at Arkansas, I didn't open up about my DACA status, because even going into Arkansas didn't exist at that time. So there was a lot of uncertainty, and I wasn't sure how people would react to me. And so during the interview process for this application, not once did I mention, okay, I might have some issues applying for a travel permit. I just wanted to see if I was going to get it based on just my parents. And so I made my proposal, made a budget plan, I got approval from the school in Pakistan. I went through the interview process. There were about 5 people I had to go through for interview. And then they submitted 2 student proposals that they liked. One was me and one was another student. And then the project itself, the Davis Project for Peace Foundation selected me. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize that this was possible. And then I was like, okay, now I have to apply for a travel permit. And so I applied for medical. I started bothering the security office. I really need this, otherwise I'm going to make my school really, really bad. But for 1 month, I was approved, so I went to Pakistan. And let me tell you about this experience, okay? So I live backside. I'm not backside, okay? So when I went there, it was totally different. Even the bathrooms, they're on the floor, okay? Different clothing, the language itself, I had to speak in Urdu, and I was like, wow, if I happened to be deported, I don't know what I would do here, how I would interact with people. This is my home, I grew up here. And I think a lot of people forget that. They think that, oh, it's just deport them, go back to their country, but this is our country.
So I think a lot of high school students go through this when they start applying for colleges, and it's something that I had to go through as well. I just remember in high school I had like these dream colleges that I wanted to look at, that I wanted to apply to, and I just remember the feeling of being so discouraged and like, disheartened from going to their admissions pages, and this was after events were imposed by the Georgia Board of Regents policy 416 and 434, and just seeing like big banners on their admissions pages saying basically that DACA students need not apply because they couldn't accept us to the colleges. And as a student who had worked so hard to try to make something of myself and live up to the dream that I had for myself and that my parents had for me to be successful in this country that they worked so hard to bring us to. It was very discouraging, and you know, that's a reality that a lot of us have to go through.
Thank you all for sharing. I want to throw a stat out to you guys for just a second. So, over 65,000 undocumented students graduate from high school every single year. And none of these undocumented students are eligible for any kind of federal student aid. And in most states, they're not even eligible for any kind of state aid. And so, consider here in Georgia, we have these two policies that Raphael alluded to, policy 416 and policy 434. And I think some of our panelists later are going to talk more about that, so I won't go too much into detail about it. But essentially, these are two policies that were promulgated by the Board of Regents here in Georgia that essentially stop undocumented students from going to public higher education here in this state. And that is a barrier that every single undocumented student, whether you have DACA or not, in this state face. And so I graduated from high school in 2011, and in 2010 was when these policies were promulgated by the Board of Regents. So as I was graduating from high school and I was applying to schools, this enormous barrier was placed in front of me. And there was a very real chance that I wasn't going to be able to go to college. So for me, I did a lot of research, and I knew that if I wanted to go to college, I had to maximize the opportunities that would be available for me. And for me, and for any undocumented students, the best opportunities to go to college come from private institutions. Because private schools are allowed to give their scholarship money to whomever they'd like to give it to. And so as a senior in high school, I applied to 14 different colleges and universities across the United States because I wanted so badly to make something of the 4.0 GPA that I had in high school, and the fact that I was salutatorian, and I knocked my SATs and ACTs out of the park, but I didn't want to let the fact that I didn't have lawful status here in the United States stop me from achieving my dream of going to college. And so thankfully, I earned a full scholarship to attend Mercer, and I got to go to school there, but not without going through that struggle of having to navigate the college admissions process as an undocumented immigrant. The college admissions process is already challenging for people who are not undocumented. And so adding that extra layer is just that much more difficult.
So I just realized how much younger y'all are. 7 years after high school. So I know, applying college stuff for y'all. So we talked about, y'all mentioned education a couple of times. So I want to ask, one of the big things that has happened in Georgia this year has been the visa legislation that is now sitting on the governor's desk that would strict funding, or is threatening to strict funding from any university, public or private, that becomes a sanctuary campus, talks about sanctuary campus. So, I want to ask y'all's opinion on that. So, we hear that term thrown around a lot. Some people are really for it, some people are really against it. Obviously, now it's coming with a lot of weight around it. So, we have the federal level and the federal government also threatening people's government talking about sanctuary. Some cities are still going through with this, some campuses are still going through with that in their public. So, in y'all's opinion, what does that term mean to you? What do you want us to be happy with it, if anything?
I'm trying not to monopolize the microphone. So just for some context, the bill that Melanie is referring to is House Bill 37. That was a bill that was introduced, moved all the way through both chambers of the legislature, the House of Representatives and the Senate, and was passed by both chambers of the legislature and is currently sitting on the governor's desk waiting to be signed. And so House Bill 37 is a bill that essentially penalizes private institutions here in Georgia that adopt sanctuary campus policies. So you saw the slide earlier with the definitions. Sanctuary essentially means that these campuses advertise themselves and adopt policies that provide a safe haven for undocumented students on their campus. And so, as was alluded to earlier by, I think, all of the panelists, education is already hard to come by. Higher education is already hard to come by here in Georgia. In every public school here in the state, undocumented students, including DACA recipients, have to pay out-of-state tuition, which is over 3 to 4 times greater than in-state tuition. And that is if they can even attend those schools. At now 3 schools here in the state of Georgia, they can't even attend. We can't even attend if you're undocumented. That's the University of Georgia, Georgia Tech, and Georgia College and State University in Milledgeville. So this bill essentially limits undocumented students from even going the route that Sumble and I took, which was to attend school at a private institution. And so you asked for our opinion. I think this piece of legislation is absolutely ludicrous. I think that it's mean-spirited, that there is no actual operative reason for the adoption of the legislation. And I think it sends a message that Georgia is not a welcoming place for immigrants. That this state does not want people like us to stay here and contribute to this society and this economy. Sumble and I went to college, and Raphael is going to college very soon, hopefully, and we're Georgians. And we're here, and we want to make this place the best place that it can be. I have the state motto of Georgia tattooed on my back: wisdom, justice, and moderation. I've lived here since I was 1, and I'm 23 now. And I have the state flag as the background on my phone. This is the only place that I want to be. But this state is sending me a message that it does not want me to be here. And this bill is an integral part of that message.
I totally agree. And it still makes me really sad. And I want to cry a little bit when I first heard about it. Because in the beginning, private institutions were giving me hope. Agnes Scott College was giving me hope. Emory was giving me hope. And now with this bill, everything's being taken away. It's bullying. It's a bullying tactic. The very little hope that I had going to Agnes Scott, and now the other students, like me, are finding out about the little opportunities that they can have. It's all being taken away. And what are we trying to do? I'm trying to become a physician here in Georgia to help understand communities. Raymond's trying to become a lawyer. We're all just trying to help our communities here. And with this bill, it's just putting us all back down. We're not progressing anywhere with this bill.
Yeah, I think the same way. I feel like as undocumented individuals, like even if we're not legal residents of Georgia, we do feel like we are a part of Georgia. You know, this is our home as well, and we do want to strive to be productive members of society and give back to the community that has raised us and that we've grown in, and just grow along with the friends that we've lived with our whole lives. Since we've already touched on just like our feelings towards this bill, I do want to talk about just a little bit about how private institutions are being penalized for using the word sanctuary, when in reality, a private institution practicing or considering itself a sanctuary campus is not breaking the law, but following the laws that are already in place to protect not only undocumented students, but just all the students on their campus. They're not they're not impeding the entrance of police officers or ICE officers into the campus illegally. It's just like when police officers come knock at your door without a warrant. Because it's a private institution, they have the legal right to ask for a judicially signed warrant. And so we're not asking any institutions to break a law, we're just asking them to use the powers that the law has to help protect and make safe havens inside their colleges for everyone.
So what can people do who want to be more involved in this issue? So especially folks who showed up tonight, and we get a lot of people talking about this. What's helpful to your communities? What's helpful to you? People who want to be allies, but we don't know where to go, what to do, what's even appropriate.
All right, so I'll start broadly and then narrow in. So just generally speaking, I think a great way to support undocumented students, undocumented immigrants, and to be a good ally is just to embrace the undocumented people in your community. Take them in as your friends, and just listen to what they have to say. And the issue of immigration is so abstract. Immigration policy is so abstract. You see the you hear the sound bites on the news, and you see the headlines, and all of the negative rhetoric that surrounded the November presidential election, and ever since President Trump's inauguration, we have just completely seen left and right the demonization and the dehumanization of immigrants and refugees in this country. And I think it's important for people to realize the humanity that everyone has, that even though you may disagree with where someone is coming from or their particular position on a policy, they're still a human being, and it's important to respect them. And that's why I take issue when people refer to undocumented immigrants like us as illegals or illegal aliens, because it denigrates us and puts us in a particular place where it makes us less human. So that being said, I think that it's important for us to consider everyone's stories, because everyone has one. And I think that the most important way that we can help change the hearts and minds of people that don't necessarily agree with us is for us to continue sharing our stories and for us to be courageous. And I really appreciate that I'm able to share this panel with these two, because I've told my story a million times now in so many different settings, but every time I do it, I'm confident that someone in the audience needed to hear an undocumented person's story, because that's what they needed to change their mind on immigration policy in this country. So, more specifically on House Bill 37, how do we get involved? How do we fight this thing? How do we keep the governor from signing it into law? I'll give a plug for my organization. We are having a community meeting tomorrow night at 7 p.m. in Norcross, where we're going to talk about this bill. And we're going to talk about some of the other anti-immigrant bills that pass through the legislature, and how we're going to unite as a community to fight it. We've got several campaigns being planned as we speak, some call campaigns, some veto campaigns, and we'd love for all of you to get involved. If you're interested, come talk to me after the panel, and I'd be happy to plug you in. But just generally keep in touch with organizations that are on the front lines fighting these bills. Not only Asian Americans Advancing Justice, but also the Latin American Association, GALEO, which is the Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials, the NAACP, the New Georgia Project. There are so many groups fighting these bills. And if you're not affiliated, or if you're not on one of these groups' mailing lists, I suggest that you get on it so you can be 100% in the know. Project South too. So you can be 100% in the know of what's going on and how you can get involved.
So, personally, after the election, I wanted to find out what more can I do, specifically for DACA and the undocumented community for juniors. And so, I was always scared. I mean, because And I always felt alone. Even just this morning, I heard about a dreamer being deported. And so that really scares me. And so I started contacting organizations and then realizing that, okay, they deal with immigration. Maybe there'll be someone out there like me. I'm not Raymond. And then I discovered the university. Like, okay, there's a university that's trying to help, the undocumented community. So just help out, contact these organizations, help out Freedom University, listen to our stories. I cannot vote, but you can vote. So use what you have, because collectively we can do so much more.
Yeah, so Raymond was giving shout outs to organizations, but personally, I'm a Freedom University student, and so I will say that, if you look us up, we work primarily off of donations from the general public. So we appreciate, help, because that's what we do. We take students that are lost, kind of discouraged, and don't know where to go from here. They're undocumented. Their parents don't really know how to help them because a lot of them are first generation college students, and so we kind of give them guidance and we help them along their path to higher education. And so if you do want to help the undocumented community, that would be definitely something to look into to help the dreamers of today enjoy.
Removal proceedings that you don't have to sign that order of that voluntary departure order. And a lot of people have been doing that because immigration officials coax undocumented immigrants. They tell them, if you sign this little document right here, this whole process will be quick. You'll be able to get to your family so much quicker. But by signing that document, they are signing away their right to an attorney and their right to a hearing and their right to the full-fledged of constitutional protections that they have under the law.
So I do want to do questions, but I want to save them to the end so we're going to have everyone come back up and do questions at once. So I'm going to switch out. So sorry, we have two panelists. We don't have enough stools, and the stools are super uncomfortable. So I apologize to my panelists for the dance. Sorry about this. For the first round of them. But I'm going to switch out, and then we'll bring everybody back up for questions at the end. Yep.
Removal defense and family petitions, and I do a lot of domestic violence petitions and visas for people who've been victims of crimes and asylum. I'm also the chapter chair of the Georgia Alabama chapter of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which is basically the kind of national, it's like our bar association for immigration because it's a really complicated issue. It has the law has the shelf life of milk, they say, and as you guys have seen probably in the last couple of months, there's a lot of stuff flying around, it's changed very rapidly. So that's kind of our professional organization that allows us to have sort of instantaneous knowledge about what's happening all within times. So it's been a really interesting year to be in charge of these two states. And I'll pass it to Oscar.
I am Azadeh Shahshahani, Legal and Advocacy Director with Project South. We are a grassroots organization based here in Atlanta, but we work with people across the Southeast. And our purpose, our mission is to help support social justice movements. And I'm also past president of the National Lawyers Guild, which is the progressive bar association that was founded in 1937. So we're actually celebrating our 80th anniversary in DC this August.
My name is Bee Lynn, and I am founder and executive director of the Venus Warehouse. We are a nonprofit that works with high school girls, 9th through 12th grade, and our partnership is with Cross Keys High School, which is on Beaufort Highway in Luxury Hills. And 85% of the student population there is Latino, and many of our students are either undocumented or they have family members that are undocumented.
My name is Noel Kelly. As Carson, this is two lawyers, but I'm a physician. So, I am actually a preventive cardiology fellow at Emory University. I'm a former Syrian refugee. My job, in addition to fixing cars, and trying to change people's heart about immigration and refugees.
Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Lopez. I am also an immigration attorney in solo practice, doing family immigration and removal cases, and recently newly elected into the General Assembly in the House of Representatives for District 99 in Gwinnett County.
So this was alluded to earlier. So as of this morning, if anyone saw the National News today, if any of you are not looking at the news for our votes are falling apart for this day, and saw the national news, there's been this first reported case of a DACA contracted student being deported. So I'm sure it's probably happened before this case, possibly, but this one in the national news is the first one being reported. So, I think a lot of people about this DACA protected people, so people got to stay here. So, what are the risks for those who receive DACA status right now? What are things that you watch out for, especially for our lawyers? Or you can yell where they are.
Okay. So if you have DACA, definitely keep your documents on you. I had very little time to read about the story this morning, but what I did know was that it seemed that the young man who was detained was not allowed to go back to his car to get his work authorization to show that he was in valid status. And because it was close to the border, they were able to complete an expedited removal, which is when you don't get an opportunity to see an immigration judge. And so he was deported within about 3 or 4 hours, from what I understood, and that was it. Remaining here pretty much his whole life. So definitely keep your documents on you. If you don't have a contact with the organization or an attorney, it's a really good idea to go ahead and make those contacts. Also to see what your options are. The estimation, I believe this comes from the American Immigration Council, and don't quote me on the exact number, but I want to say it's around 20% of people who are here in undocumented status actually do have some pathway to lawful status, especially people in DACA. It's a really important thing to check and make sure that you know what your options and rights are.
I guess one of the things that I want to add, particularly for these scattered cases and the reason they get media attention, is that to a certain extent we do want to consider these as more exceptional cases. And I say that because I also don't like a lot of the queer generation that happens, that it's not completely unfounded, but also it's not that it's widespread. And I'm particularly always concerned with, in particular, the immigrant community and those with that are DACA recipients to not think that this is just a wholesale, anybody and everybody's being picked up. And for the few cases, 2 or 3 cases that have had national attention, there's been particularities about that case, about why the person ended up getting picked up, or why the fact that they were DACA recipients wasn't sufficient protection. For this morning's case, it was more of an issue of documentation on hand. But prior ones have been issues of being in process or have not reapplied or renewed within a time frame. So there was actually a gap in time of them being DACA approved and then having a DACA renewed. So there's always particularities about what happens in these cases. So it's important to know that, and again, it's important for me to make sure that there's not a general sweep of fear.
So we want to talk about that fear a little bit. I know also, I think folks who were up here a minute ago, and we talked about, I talked about
provide services but are not necessarily attorneys. But to be quite frank, I've seen the same sort of gearing of the fear from the law firms themselves and actual attorneys that use the fear of folks to kind of tell them, this is this process that you can do, or come and talk to me, and we'll see what we can work out. So that I think is the two things that happens. People don't get services that they're actually entitled to, and then we've had the issue of fraud and abuse of different community advocates.
I tend to think of, working with the undocumented community, there are two timelines. So one was the pre-DACA and post-DACA. And so before DACA was passed, a lot of the kids that I work with really didn't have any sort of hope in terms of being able to go to college. And what DACA enabled them to do was not only go to school, but also have a driver's license and have a work permit. And so before DACA was passed, these kids were just paralyzed. They could not work, they could not drive, and not go to college. And then post-DACA, one of the things that I remember the most about the students telling me their reaction to DACA being passed was, the number one thing they said was, I was so happy that I could drive my mom somewhere because I could no longer, be scared that she would get pulled over for not having a license and being deported. So it wasn't even about themselves and their future, it was about keeping their families together. And then the next timeline that I often think about is post-Trump. And so obviously, under Obama's administration, we did have deportation, so this is not something new. But something did shift within the community post-Trump. And part of it was, the rhetoric that we heard nationally and locally that really dragged the communities through that. And you're talking about 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old girls who are in a Title I school, they're already under-resourced, and they're being told over and over that they're criminals, they don't belong here. And so that has a tremendous impact on self-esteem and how they feel about themselves, and they tend to do things like not finish school, which is a really big education equity issue that we often don't talk about. So a lot of people working in education equity talk about things like third grade reading level and the prison to school pipeline, but nobody talks about undocumented and what happens when you do not have opportunities to pursue something after high school. We have higher dropout rates, we have minimum wage jobs, and it just impacts the community in a way that's overlooked. And then in terms of the fear, even though there are isolated incidences of the deportation, within the girls that I work with, we've had a couple family members being deported. And when they see it happening within their own families, or they see their family's friends being deported, it is a very scary thing. And so, we had a case where somebody who was suffering from depression tried to commit suicide the week after the stepdad was picked up. Because these processes are very undignified. You are literally taking a family member away with no process of saying goodbye, and the information is not available, so you spend all this time trying to figure out where they took your family member, and then they're being detained in these for-profit detention centers that have atrocious conditions. And oftentimes parents have language issues, they don't know who to trust, and like Brenda said, there are attorneys out there who aren't actually working in their best interest. And so these are the things that are not really talked about, what happens to these students, these kids, when their parents are taken away from them.
And just to address the fear issue, I'm not familiar with the rules, but I think fear is driven by ignorance and feeling helplessness. I came here after 9/11, 2 weeks after 9/11 as a Muslim refugee. I felt afraid, but what made me feel welcome is having several members of church, people came to our house and welcomed us. And I felt like them being our home made us feel safe and welcome. We knew someone knew how to protect us. I'll give you another story, like when President Trump did the first ban, he said no Syrian refugee can come in anymore. Most of Syrian refugees can here within 2 years. A lot of them live across in Georgia. I remember the day when the ban came out, me and my mom and my 2 other American friends who had been touring English went to this household of like 10 refugees. we sat down at a meal and we were laughing. And I noticed I was like, these people are not afraid because they have us in their community. So there's a lot of power being present in communities in America, even for the undocumented immigrant, to be in their household and to be available to them makes them feel like, okay, someone can protect me if I'm in need and will ask about me. And that makes them feel less afraid and base their decision not on emotion but reason. So I think that's important for us to recognize that I know all of us felt helpless when Trump got elected and all these things. There's a lot of power we could do by just being present in communities and telling people, hey, you're welcome here, my name is such and such, I'm available, here's my phone number. Let me know what you need, and I'll be there for you.
Just building on what others have said, I think it's really a wave of repressive actions coming from the federal government that's then sort of trickling down and creating a really hateful atmosphere towards Muslim and immigrants and people of color. I mean, the day after the elections, I, as a Muslim immigrant and person of color, I mean, I was feeling kind of unsafe, walking around when, this person with a clear record of white supremacy has now been elected, and, what the implications of that for the country, kind of legitimizing, basically, hate language and hate crimes against our communities. And, there hasn't really been a break, because ever since then, obviously, we've seen, the Muslim ban 1, Muslim ban 2, raids happening, first targeting Latino immigrants, and this past week, targeting the Somalis in Clarkson, targeting other communities. So it's, sort of like a series of escalating action after action after action. But, I very much agree with you that what is sort of the counter to that is the feeling of community. So for me, one of the most hopeful moments actually was the weekend after the Muslim ban went into effect. I know Sarah and I were communicating, and Sarah, was one of the first people who actually went to the airport and really answered the call as an attorney, getting other attorneys organized to represent people who were Georgians who were basically coming back from vacation, and they're coming back to their homes, and were then detained at the airport. And then it was a really frantic time for a lot of us, and then the protest that was organized by basically one individual feeling the call and really feeling outraged. And I got to the airport expecting to see maybe a couple hundred people, like the people I always see at protests as an activist. And I get there, and there's people coming, masses of people coming and coming and coming. I mean, as you all know, there were 6,000 to 7,000 people there. Many of them probably have never been to a protest before in their lives. And that, to me, symbolizes the moment that we're in. It's really, outrageous, daily outrages that we're seeing, coming down from the federal government, not to mention the state. But, to counter that, I think it's the people's movement that is really strong. It's really the strongest that I have ever seen in the past 15 years or so, and people's willingness to reach out, to create community, to be welcoming in all of the signs that we're seeing, people's backyards, the refugees are welcome here, immigrants are welcome here. That is a strong and powerful counter to fear.
So you mentioned there's a lot of new federal policies that will probably be ongoing for the next however many years. Some state policies. So there's the Attorney General announced a plan to withhold criminal justice funding for any city who's claiming sanctuary. We have the bill that's on the governor's desk for any university to defund them if they're trying to sanctuary. So there seems to be a lot. I feel like officials are looking for something to grasp onto, something to target for some of this stuff, and so there seems to be a lot of opportunities for sanctuary. And so I asked our other set of panelists kind of around this, so I'd be interested in y'all's assessment of kind of what is this term, is it important? I know some cities have come out and made official statements, the state of Atlanta has made some statements that hasn't used the actual word. There seems to be a lot wrapped up on both sides, so there's some opinions on kind of where does that stay on, what should people be asking about that term?
So I'm going to start. I key again here around the concept of sanctuary is making sure that we define it broadly enough so that all of our communities are feeling safe and finding the city of Atlanta a place that basically they can live a dignified life.
So I understand that movement-wise it's important to make the definition really broad, but I do want to clarify as to the actual law, particularly as it relates to SB 37. First of all, the state authority 2 years ago, the state legislature already passed provisions for sanctuary cities. The only thing that matters, what's most important legally in terms of what that means in terms of sanctuary cities, is that cities police departments cannot basically cannot not comply with ICE containers. Now they don't have to automatically participate either, but they can't outright deny. So that's the difference when we actually hear sanctuary cities in terms of a real definition, legal definition that matters in other states. What they're doing is the cities through their law enforcement agencies are saying, we won't automatically in every case comply with all ICE containers. That does not mean they don't do it on a case-by-case basis, because that is still true for any city that still has nominated itself a sanctuary city. And I think that that's a very practical policy, because if you have folks that do have in fact had convictions for egregious crimes, those cities do collaborate with ICE authorities if there are containers placed. In terms of the college or university aspect, it's a very, very different issue that we're talking about, and though we still use the same word, sanctuary. When these universities in our state, the private universities, particularly the two that became public or had more media attention, which was Emory and Aggie Scott, what they were referring to when they said that they were becoming sanctuary campuses is that broader definition of being inclusive and welcoming and providing as best resources as they can for their diverse student population, regardless of their immigration status. At no point in time, even before or during or afterwards, does that mean that they were going to violate any state or federal law in doing so. So they have been fully compliant with state law, they have been fully compliant with federal law, and SB 37 specifically, what it says is that there would be, as a penalty, removal of state funding if the private university violated federal law. Not federal immigration law, but just any federal law. But again, what I tell people, if you think about it, when on earth have we ever heard any private institution, anywhere, educational institution, bluntly say, I'm just going to not comply with whatever federal law there is. That's just not something that any institution would do, or has done. Most definitely not in an intentional, willful kind of sense. So the context is totally different between when we're talking about cities and regarding their compliance with immigration containers or immigration holds, and when we're talking about universities, because they have no law enforcement agency, they have no reason to comply with ICE containers. And as was mentioned before by the young man, as was in the past and as continues to be the case now, if for some reason ICE happened to already have a warrant for a student at a university, there is nothing before or after HB 37 that the university was going to do different than allow that to happen, if in fact there's actually a warrant. But what I tell people, first of all, ICE has always made universities no-go zones. And the reality is that if ICE knows what university you're attending, I promise you they know where you live. And so they're going to go look for you where you live if they actually have a warrant out for you. So I just wanted to clarify what we're talking about and the particularities and the specificity of the legal issue is important. And in terms of laws, we're not talking about the broader sense of sanctuary. We're talking about very specific issues regarding compliance and collaboration or cooperation with ICE enforcement.
Can I just on the detainer issue, so actually, I'm sure there's many federal cases nationwide that have come out saying that actually, detainer is basically for all intents and purposes a piece of paper. A detainer is not a judicial warrant, does not have a judicial, it does not have the force of a judicial warrant. targeting basically a particular person. Basically, I don't know if everyone here is familiar with what a detainer is. It's basically a document issued by Immigration and Customs Enforcement telling a local law enforcement agency that we think this person might be undocumented. Can you hold them for us until we have a chance to come and pick them up? So what would happen in the past is that, let's say, Clayton County would hold a person for ICE for sometimes for weeks on end on the basis of a detainer. And so then people went to court around the country and got federal courts to issue decisions saying that, no, you can't actually do that because, again, a detainer is not a judicial warrant. So that detention is actually illegal, and actually localities are on the hook for that if they rely on the detainer to hold people. And so as a result, we have this movement nationwide where now more than 200 localities nationwide have adopted policies saying that, different ways. Some are more broad, some are more limited. There are 4 counties in Georgia, including DeKalb, Fayette, Clayton, and Fulton, saying that basically in the absence of a judicial warrant, the sheriff is not going to hold somebody for ICE, which is totally in compliance with federal law, because both federal and the state law on this issue only talk about communication, they don't talk about detainers. And on top of that, these sheriffs are actually complying with the Constitution, because the 4th Amendment says that you can't basically, you can't legally hold people. And so that's basically what these sheriffs are doing, they're complying with the Constitution. So regardless of whatever scare tactics Attorney General Jeff Sessions tried to employ to scare localities, at the end of the day, what these localities are doing, and more of them will do the same, is they're complying with the Constitution.
So you don't think that that it'll hold, really, if Fulton County were to not be complying with this, you don't think it will hold up to actually withhold federal funding?
Probably not. I mean, I'm sure Trump and Sessions are going to think of all sorts of creative ways, but most likely not. And there's actually federal litigation right now that's been brought by some of the more progressive places on the West Coast, preemptively trying to challenge this type of executive order by Trump on the basis of his withdrawal of funding. Because the reality is that actually, as far as I know, there is no locality anywhere in the country right now that is in violation of federal law on this issue. Because federal law, basically what federal law says is that a locality cannot decide not to communicate with ICE. They all have to communicate with ICE. And there's no locality, as far as I know, that says that you can't communicate with ICE. What they do talk about is basically illegal and unconstitutional over-detention of a person on the basis of an ICE detainer.
So did anyone else have what to say something on this? Because I want to make sure we have time for audience questions too.
No, I think that really about covers it, and people need to stand up and be strong against these policies. On the flip side of that, we do have 287 counties here in Georgia, and so what we are seeing more of, and I think about in your practice, Brenda, but in mine, we're seeing more people who are being taken into custody under these detainers and rolled to ICE because they are in conjunction with 287G. And that's the federal law that allows for collaboration between state and local law enforcement associations and the federal government. So they're able to inquire about their immigration status, and they seem to be taking a lot of liberties with that. I've seen several cases recently where people have been stopped for kind of imagined violations. That's what we're seeing. People getting stopped for the taillight being out, or you didn't come to a complete stop, those sorts of things that are very minor. And it has a really chilling effect on communities. The other thing that does concern me that we're seeing is people who are being picked up at courthouses and at more sensitive locations. That's one of the things that deeply concerns me about what the administration is doing right now, because we're hearing reports of people appearing in court to get TPOs because they're the victims of domestic violence, and ICE is there to greet them. And that's really horrible. That should not be happening. People should be able to call police if they're the victim of a crime. And people are not willing to report because they're afraid that the police in these areas will question them about their immigration status. And so that's a really detrimental effect on our communities, and it's something that I think that people who are allies need to be aware of and that they have social services, that they're protected, and that our communities are safer. It just does not make our communities safer.
I think it's also important to understand just how certain municipalities and precincts operate, because within counties we've identified a couple of them who will hold you and detain and call ICE. But there are certain cities, including Brookhaven, in Doraville, where they don't have those policies, and they are trying to build relationships with the community so that there is that trust where people can call and report crimes if they are in fact a victim of crime. And many people hesitate to do that. So I think there's an education component involved in terms of learning exactly how each city operates, how each county operates. Gwinnett and Cobb particularly are among the most unkind. And then it's also complicated when people live in one area and they work in one area, and sort of just educating them on where they need to be more cautious. So I think the idea of sanctuary in theory might be something a little bit more symbolic or idealistic, but the reality is I think it's most important to have those relationships with the local enforcement where we can protect people better versus calling a city a sanctuary and maybe even putting a target on the backs of the city. Because I think we do have a very aggressive, vindictive federal government where we see some of the cities who have declared themselves sanctuary being targeted. And the other thing is, even if municipalities choose not to cooperate, ICE doesn't need their cooperation, so they can go into these places anyway.
Just one thing I was saying, I go to all these panels, and I'm sure the audience is 90% against Trump. And what happens, a lot of the Trump supporters actually don't have a clue what the DACA people go through. But all of the things they talk about, they don't hear about it, they don't know about it, because what they're watching is Fox News, Sean Hannity. He doesn't even report about it. They're not going to show a student who's going to go be a doctor, who wants to be a lawyer. So they have no incentive actually to stand up against these laws. I met a lot of Trump supporters, they may be good for Trump because of healthcare, but they actually want refugees coming, they want immigrants coming, and they don't have the way to help, because every time they speak out, that's what happens. They get defensive, they get attacked by why they vote for Trump. So I think it's very important for us to have this educational forum in actually those communities, because if all of us vote against us, we're only 50%. We still need the other 50% to help us vote against these policies. And I think that's very important. That's why I speak, actually. Majority of the time, actually, I speak with Trump supporters, and I'm sharing my experience about how much I love this country and why I'm here. This is my home. So I think they need to hear that. They're not going to respond to data. You can give them all the policy, they respond to emotion. Because when they see you, they see the dollar. I don't want my daughter to go through the same thing. It's very important for us to awaken this emotion into people's heart and get them to our side. So just remember that in back of your mind. We need them also to go against this policy and vote for us. But they're not against everything we stand for. They just voted for Trump for one reason, or you agree with us for other reasons.
So for Facebook Live, which I make sure to show it to anyone you know who has questions about immigration. I know I will show it to my family who are Trump supporters. So we're going to make sure we have time for questions. So we have, I can get all of our other folks back up here if need be. But who's got, anyone have a question they want to ask? Just yell at us.
Hi, my name is David. I work for Georgia State University, and my question is concerning DACA students and in-state tuition. So, the Board of Regents extends in-state tuition to members of the military who are stationed in Georgia, Africa, or whatever. So, my question is, are DACA students allowed to join the military?
The quick answer to that is no. To enter the military, you need a green card at the minimum. I know because I was in AFJROTC in high school, and I love the military. And I actually took the ASVAB and I did a really good job on it. And I had a lot of recruiters come talk to me, trying to get me to enlist. And I ran into that same wall, just like in college. I ran into that same wall that I couldn't join the military.
So your name is David? David. So I'll expand a little bit. There is a special program that the military employs called the MAPNI program. Is anyone familiar with MAPNI? M-A-B-N-I? All right. So MAPNI stands for Military Accessions Vital to the National Interest. And it's a special program that the Army has, and I think the Navy may have had it in the past. And I don't even think that the Army has this program currently active, but they recently made it available to DACA recipients, where you enlist, and then you go through about 10 weeks of basic training, and then at the conclusion of your basic combat training, you would naturalize as a United States citizen. Not everyone that applies to enlist for the MAPNI program makes it or is accepted. I was one of those people. So when I graduated from college and I moved up to Atlanta to work, I wanted to get my citizenship really badly, and the only pathways that I had for citizenship were one, getting married to a U.S. citizen, or two, waiting for Congress to pass a law that would provide a pathway to citizenship for me, which is likely not going to happen anytime soon. So I was like, you know what, this program sounds really cool, I'm going to try joining the military. And so I practiced for the ASVAB, and I got into really great shape. I lost a lot of weight to train up to be able to join the military. And then I spoke to my recruiter several times, but the closest recruiter to me that specialized in this program was all the way in Birmingham, Alabama. And so I made the trip several times to Alabama and back to Atlanta to try and join the military. Because I wanted my citizenship that badly. And then finally, my recruiter told me that I was likely to be medically disqualified from the military because when I was a junior in high school, I tried to kill myself. And I tried to kill myself because I couldn't get my citizenship. And I was fed up with living in a world where the United States didn't want me to be here, and I didn't belong in my country of origin either, the Philippines. And I just didn't want to continue dealing with that psychological trauma of being in that middle place in between two worlds. And so it's kind of funny how that happened when I was a junior in high school, and then when I was trying to join the military, that ended up being the reason that I wouldn't have been able to join. So, long answer to your question is, there is a program, it's very complicated, and I don't even think it's active anymore.
And it's specialized skills, so it's not just
Oh yeah, I didn't mention that. Thank you so much, Brenda. So this program is available to either healthcare professionals or people that are fluent in what the Army deems to be critical languages. And so I qualified initially because I'm also fluent in Tagalog, the native language of the Philippines.
I was going to ask that, and then also it's one of those. I was going to add that. So yeah, right. And then also it's one of those programs that it seems really shaky. The ground is very shaky for it right now. That program was founded. Margaret Stock, who's actually an immigration attorney in Alaska, she ran for senator in Alaska, and she's on a board that I'm on, and she was talking about how it's kind of questionable about whether or not the president will keep it around.
Other questions?
I understand that there's some legislation that may come up in Washington, the Bridge Act. Could you speak about that? I think it would apply to the DACA people.
I'll say this. I actually have also not read the actual bill itself because it's not going to. It's not going to. Yes. Honestly, because of that reason, we just don't have the votes for it. It was something that was introduced, like a lot of legislation, both at the federal and state level, from both parties, and sometimes it's done for issues of maybe making a statement conversation about it, but, it was a consideration of some sort of version of, regularizing, particularly those that already have DACA, but like I said, there's not the political will or votes for that to go anywhere, so one of my concerns when talking about stuff like this, and when it comes out in the news that something was proposed and filed, that I think there's been a lot of misinformation, and you end up with the issues of fraud and abuse because, people say, oh, there's something, the federal government going through, it's not going anywhere.
What are your takes on the upcoming city council and mayoral elections? Are there any outstanding candidates that you find have been great advocates for immigration?
The mayoral elections, well, I would say Senator Ford is the one candidate who has actually openly come out in support of sanctuary. Now, he hasn't seen our list of demands, but he has supported the concept of sanctuary. And our coalition is going to try to meet with the mayoral candidates to see what their stance is on this issue.
Can I add, without knowing exactly all the candidates' positions, and it's still early in the game to see who's actually going to be closer to the front runners, my concern, quite honestly, is less with any of the candidates for the city of Atlanta. Because the city of Atlanta, not that we get everything we want, but generally, at least for this past several years, has been generally more proactive and more positive in terms of their treatment and in terms of different programs that they have becoming of being as open or inclusive as the policies have been today. If you're worried about municipal elections, that's great, but worry about the small local cities where we're talking about the issues of enforcement, the issues of how restrictive or how they want to use their police department. So don't worry about City of Atlanta in that context. Worry about the city of Wilburn, the city of Sandy Springs, the Smyrna, Fairburn, Gainesville. Worry about these actual local municipal elections. Participate in those, whether or not you live in those elections. Find out what those candidates, both the city council folks and their mayoral candidates, what their take is on the issues of enforcement that we've been discussing. That, quite frankly, would make us go a much longer way if we started, if we got out of the city of Atlanta.
Hi. I have a question that's actually quite personal, but you may be able to make it a little more general. I have a family member who has to go to the ICE office in May for an annual check-in with us. She's the mom of a couple of dreamers. And we're very concerned about what's going to happen to her. During the Obama years, they would just let her stay in case they come back next year. I know that there were a few days where people were going down to the ICE office down there at 180, Grant Street. Yeah, and I was just wondering, what are the things that people who are concerned in the community can do that can possibly have an impact? I'm interested in her particular situation, but I also think in more general terms for folks who are on the radar of ICE and that now may be targeted.
So it's hard to say what you as an individual can do when you are dealing with a situation for a loved one. You need to have appropriate counsel, first of all, to see if there's any options regarding getting a case reopened in court or finding a stay. There's some things that you can do, some different administrative actions. You may, in that case, be able to submit support letters. There may be ways to document any sort of hardship to the family, if there's any sort of medical concerns, those sorts of things. And the country conditions of origin, whatever's going on, wherever you're from. Those are the sorts of things that you start to look for. But, be there and be supportive, and also have a family plan, because it's a really about, I don't know, I've only had a couple of clients taken into custody recently at check-ins, but the period for returning has been a lot shorter. Instead of being a year, it's 90 days, or 30 days, or 6 months. And you're told that the next time you come, you need to have a plane ticket. So if that's the case, then I would just advise making sure that not in every case, because in some cases we are going to get stays still granted. But if that's the situation, then I just be looking for some kind of remedy to see if there's a way to get around it, and also make sure that the family is prepared with a plan of what you're going to do. So dour, sorry.
Those are great suggestions to follow. Just in terms of, broader community organizing, I know the organization Georgia Latin Alliance for Human Rights, 3 of their members were kind of in a very similar situation in the last weeks, and so they put out the call to the broader community wanting to support, to actually come out, so people don't feel that they're going in by themselves, rather go for their morale, and also to show ICE and the government that people aren't alone. There's a bunch of us out here who are in support of them. So just something to keep in mind. So your hand. That gentleman up there. He works with us. Oh.
You can ask a question. I work for a organization, and we have several students who are undocumented. A couple, thank goodness, have actually gotten into Harvard. But my question is, what are some suggestions that you have for organizations such as Latin American Association that I, as a staff member, can refer our students to as resources as they are going through the college application, scholarship application process, just to kind of get them connected, especially through the recent changes that are happening.
Whenever recent students have thoughts that we have
So, like I've been saying, we do like outreach to students, but we also like it when students look for us. If there's anyone that's like lost and just like a lot of times students will be Googling because they're lost and they don't know where they can apply to school, and they'll find Freedom University. And we provide all the necessary information about like where they can apply to and what scholarships apply to them. So definitely, like if any of you know a student that is lost and doesn't know where to go from here, point them in our direction, and we'll help them all.
I just want to add something that, because I don't know why, but I end up talking to a lot of middle school, high schoolers, and it may not necessarily, the ideal thing that people want to hear, but I think it's important because it's realistic and practical, and that is that there is 49 other states. And if our state currently is not looking into its best future interests, and it's difficult to enroll into a university in the state of Georgia, you need to look elsewhere. It's not something that I say happily, because it's sad that we would lose the talent and the knowledge and our investment in our K-12 education of these students. It's a really bad thing, and it's a really poor economic decision for the state of Georgia. But for the personal student, for the individual student, sometimes you just have to be okay with saying, you know what, I'm going to go to a university, a private university outside the state. For folks that are in high school, especially maybe or middle school, that's something that I've been talking to parents about when they have younger students. There are a couple of states, are we still at 9? I haven't paid as much attention as I used to. We're still at 9 states that have granted state tuition, or are we down to 8? But we're down to 7. Okay, so and I probably could rattle them off when I think of the number. But there are states, few, that do grant in-state tuition to students that graduate from their state schools, depending on how long they've been residents of that state. Usually it's a requirement of about 3 to 4 years, so basically most of your high school track. Honestly, to a certain extent, I've been beginning to tell parents, especially with middle schoolers or early 9th graders, is that sometimes you may actually want to move too. to a state that is going to be more inclusive, more progressive, that has legislation that actually will allow your child, once they finish their public education there, to go on to a public university in that school. And the only state that provides state scholarship is actually Texas. All the other 7 or so states provide a state tuition, but still not necessarily the state funding. But there's still options. So that's something to consider. It's something that we honestly need to start telling both the young folks and the parents. There are options elsewhere.
I think I hesitated on that question for a second because the reality is college is not accessible for all kids. And so even though we have some really talented, smart people here who are able to go to a private school, I work with a lot of kids who are average students or below average students, and so it becomes even more difficult in terms of access to higher education. There are the challenges of being able to get scholarship at a private school, and then for the public ones that are available, the challenge of being able to pay that tuition. So there is one loophole that we did find out is if you do online classes, which is really challenging for students who don't excel outside of the classroom. You can pay in-state tuition, which cuts the cost down drastically. So that's one avenue in terms of thinking through cost and thinking through, if you are not going to get into one of these private schools. And the second piece is something that I think we need to talk about broadly across the line of education in general, is sometimes college is not the answer for everybody, and that is okay. If you encourage kids to have a trade, to have some sort of career pathway, that also is just as important. And so for some of our girls, we've had to be really creative about how we support them after high school. And one of the ways in which a few of the girls have taken is getting a certificate in translation and trying to plug them in, a law firm so that we can translate. I know the cities need translators, and then the medical profession also needs translators. So it's taking these talents that are innately there already and showing them how that is a strength and an asset versus something that they might be embarrassed or ashamed about. But it's really thinking creatively about other pathways besides college, because it's a reality for all kids. College may not be the best for them, and that is okay, and we need to stop forcing that narrative on every child and making them feel embarrassed or ashamed of it, because sometimes that pathway is made differently. And our goal is to make sure that our kids are independent and they can take care of themselves and their families and achieve whatever they want to.
If they do want to go to college, though, a couple of weeks ago I spoke at the Southern Association of College Admissions Counselors regional meeting, and that particular group of people, that group of middle and high school and some college admissions counselors and also guidance counselors at the middle and high school level are, in my experience, getting more and more interested in finding ways and resources to aid their students who are undocumented. And so, like for me, when I was going through high school, I was undocumented and didn't know where to go to school. My guidance counselor in high school told me that I was the first ever student that he had ever assisted who was undocumented. And I think more and more people, especially given the current climate and given the fact that the youth immigrant rights movement has been going on for a couple of years now, more and more undocumented immigrants and DACA recipients are coming, quote unquote, out of the shadows to declare that they are undocumented and unafraid and are looking for ways to further their education. So that being said, I think it would be helpful for us, especially as staff members at nonprofit organizations, for us to work with the counseling staff at the high schools and at the middle schools and at the colleges to make sure that they are aware of these policies in Georgia, like 416 and 432, how they affect their undocumented students, and equip them with the tools that they need to equip their students with the tools to be able to go to the colleges that they like to attend.
So I think we are
you mentioned that these kids get so disheartened at the dental prospect. That there was a huge dropout rate among your students. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that this is a general problem, or is it just now? I mean, is this lack of, is the fact that there's no future that makes people out of school give up, is that a recent thing, or do you think that is a pretty broad thing across the country?
Well, in terms of folks that, and there's an issue of their immigration status, I think that definitely plays a major role in terms of pursuing or not pursuing and sort of what options they see in their life. But the general broader high rate of dropouts, particularly amongst the Latino community, most definitely has far more broader issues. So a lot of the context basically, and you see it, right? If you look at schools that are, and this is true for most students of color, if you look at schools that are predominantly schools of color, regardless of what racial or ethnic background that may be, you're also likely and most often than not going to find lower socioeconomic backgrounds and families as well. So I think that the broader context of the dropout issue deals more with that, and in relationship to that, the schools are, for that same reason, because that's the student population that they have, is what you're going to end up finding schools that are underfunded, overcrowded, and everything else that comes with not having an equitable education school system across even counties. So I think that there's most definitely that it plays an important role, particularly if you are a student that is affected by your immigration status. But I think that the broader dropout rate is definitely in relationship to a lot of other factors.
That's a good, nice broad answer. I think the more granular thing you pointed out is the wonderful thing about DACA is it really gave a lot of people a lot of hope. And I know when it first came out, a flood of people that started coming into our office and coming to the events that we had planned and all the different places to find these resources and get signed up and apply for the program. Lots of people had to go and get GEDs because they hadn't completed their high school education, and lots of people said, well, I didn't think that this would be a path that would work for me. There was no benefit. I didn't see it, but now I do. So it did bring a lot of people to complete that. And I hope you don't use it.
I agree with her, actually, like the dropout rate for kids and not necessarily like having the hope of getting documentation. Most of these kids actually come from low socioeconomic status and they have no role models. We have this unconscious bias that we expect people who live in a poor neighborhood one day to wake up and say, I'm going to be a doctor or something. Without having any role model in the community. Like they go to their neighbors, the neighbors are not lawyers and doctors, their parents are not lawyers and doctors, they live in a community without role models. And we expect them somehow magically, like having that, I don't know, the Ben Carson story or something like that, to wake up one day and come from this neighborhood project and become this neurosurgeon. But that's the exception, that's not the rule. And I noticed that I came from Clarkston High School, and I went back and I asked, how are you going to show up here as doctor and talk to you guys? Like, nobody. And Clarkston only 10 minutes from Emory University. So there's a problem here. Like, we would just expect people to rise up one day, but we need to be in the community and show these kids, hey, I look like you, I've been through the same struggle as you. You could be like me one day, despite this challenge. Maybe by the time you decide to become a physician, the issue will change. But you need to have a persistence. Dropping out is not an option. So it's important, like, to think about role modeling plays a big role in these communities because they don't have no role models.
It's similar to what everybody else said. It's an additional layer to socioeconomics that complicates things and makes it easier to drop out. And then one of the other things is we know that parental engagement is really important in the success of the child. And so there's also that lack of parental involvement, maybe because of fear, maybe lack of community outreach, or schools not knowing or understanding how to engage parents. And one thing that we have seen across cities was the level of graduation actually increased when the principals started doing more outreach with parents in terms of teaching them how to speak English. So I think it's a lot of different factors, and it's one that adds onto an already complicated situation.
We hit 8:30, so I want to make sure everybody gets out of here on time. But I would say, can we
Faith Foundation, we're having this conversation in one of the blackest cities in the union. And so, I'm from the West End, I'm native Atlanta, but I was educated in Buckhead. I went to these multicultural schools, North Atlanta, Garden Hills. And so I got a lot of Peruvian friends, be like, whatever, but at the end of the day, I'm still a black man. And so from a black man perspective, African American, I don't mean Nigerian, Ghana, with the last name that they brought from the country. I mean the folks who got the slave last name, Johnson, Smith, that's a different type of individual. And so in these immigration conversations, I'm trying to find out where the African American fit. Not the African, right? Not the Haitian, because they got their last name. And they brought the recipes that their ancestors used to cook. Like most refugees, right? You brought the last name with you from way back. And you brought the recipes from the homeland with you. But see, the Negro, the regular Negro, the Alabama, right? The Mississippi Negro, they didn't get a chance to make that decision. You know what I'm saying? Hey, Johnson, Smith, the recipes we got now, we done made up. Do some shit that you were just given from the slave master. But when I hear y'all talk, the things that you guys are going through, I might not personally operate what my ancestors did, my great-grandmother did. ICE, that's the red dogs in Atlanta. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so I'm just trying to figure out, is the black, are we allies? You know what I mean? Like, what is the black Atlantans, Nikisha Johnson, right? Like, what's Nikisha Johnson role in this fight? Because the hood, because I asked the hood to come to this, and the hood is like, well, man, them immigrants, man, they got their own problem, man. They don't care about me, because as soon as they get situated over here, they just gonna go hang with the white people. And I'm telling my immigrant friends, like, hey, it's all good. Just understand, like, the black folk ain't sitting on ice towards you. You know what I'm saying? That ain't black folk. Black folk don't own shit. So every problem that you're really going through is not the black man. And I'm gonna pass this to you, but because the black community is trying to figure out where we lie in this conversation, you have allies, but then you have black people that have been, you know, it's a jungle out here in the communities where the lower income is a jungle. Jungle survival of the fittest. So the undocumented, to certain black people, you got a target on your head, because we out here trying to eat, we can't find no job. White America did us wrong, so it's like, okay, you done undocumented. You ain't got no bank account, you know what I'm saying? You just like the dope boy, who if I rob you, you're not gonna tell the police because you still the ICE. So black folks are robbing undocumented. It's on some survival of the fittest thing. But then there's other black folks that's like, man, I feel what they're going through. What can I do? So what can I take back to my folks, right? And provide some sort of assistance to this group.
So I like to call it that our issues amongst different groups, whatever perception or identity that may be for you, is that we may have different symptoms, and the symptoms may show up differently, but the root illness is the same. We're talking about historic prejudice, historic discrimination. We're talking about valuing and supporting civil rights issues, constitutional rights, social economic justice, affordability of housing, displacement of communities, over enforcement of particular communities. So yes, the symptoms show up differently, maybe within your context of your community and those that you may socialize with, but it's exactly the same problem and the same illness. And it's the same issues that we're fighting to better. So I think that is a conversation that we need to have. Are we going to have a one-to-one, like, I got this problem, I got the same problem? No, we're not going to do that. But if I told you, you know what, I'd like both of us to have some civil rights, I think that you and I may be like, yeah, okay, we like civil rights. And so I think that that's the conversation that we need to have, in the way that we need to look at it when we talk amongst different groups that impact
But there's a saying, rich people are different around the world, but poor people are the same. So think about this. All the, most refugee immigrants with low socioeconomic status and had a language barrier to it. So I always believe if we can help the immigrant refugee, we can help the entire country. So I went to Morehouse Medical School, I went to Boston High School, and there's a statistic, minority physicians or immigrant doctors of immigrant background are more likely to go back to underserved community and serve. I'm at grade 90% of my patients are black. I'm at Boston Clinic, 60% of my patients are black. So what I'm saying is, what we should also look at us as an investment in the country to come back and serve you because we go through the same issue like you did too. When it comes to poverty and like not having access to care or having access to education. And sometimes, when you serve people, there's no one colors, Because if you're in need, you don't care who's serving you.
Just like to talk a little bit about the fact you said it's a juggle offer, and I get that. Like personally, my father is a contractor. He does like construction work for a living, and a big issue that we see is like a lot of African American brothers. They feel like attacked because my father came to this country and he's doing construction work, and if you guys do construction work too, my father's doing the same work, harder for less money, and that's the problem we're seeing. And I just remember like a while back I read like an anecdote about a wealthy man who walks into a bar and there's 12 cookies on the plate, and he takes 11 of them. There's an African American man sitting next to the plate of cookies, and an immigrant walks in, the same Mexican, because I'm Mexican. And he takes that last cookie, and the wealthy man looks at the African American and he says, "Look, that guy just took your cookie." And in the end, me and you are fighting over one cookie, right? But what we need to do is come together as minority communities, as brothers, and talk about the fact that this wealthy man just took 11 cookies for himself. And I think that's important, like coming together, intersectionality, not just amongst black and white people, black and Mexican people, undocumented individuals, and the Asian community, all of us need to come together and recognize that somebody out there is taking 11 cookies.
I think that our communities are currently not allies, but we should be, and this is something that I really want to change because there is intersection. There are black immigrants and there are black undocumented immigrants who are also under attack. And so I think that both of our communities have not done the best job at showing up for each other. We should be showing up for you, and you should be showing up for us. And I think that's something that we need to continue to work on. And I know that hasn't always been historically the case in terms of how the Asian and Black community used to work together. We worked alongside during the Civil Rights Movement, and a lot of our social justice movement was built from mimicking your social justice movement. And I think what happened was we became victims of a system that started telling a different story for us. It didn't preserve our history, and then they told us that we were the model minority, and that if we kept our head down and if we did everything right, then we would be okay. And so what we did was we kept our head down, we kept the target off our back, but here's the reality. If you look at the history of Asian American in this country, we've been treated just as poorly in many ways. The railroads were built on the back of Chinese slaves. And so when we allow a system to tell our history for us, it leaves people like me and many generations removed from what happened to our people. We get complacent and we do put our heads down. But I think it's up to the people like me and people like Raymond and everyone sitting up here to take those steps to start building that allyship. Because I, as a person, can be there for you, but my community is not doing a good enough job, and I want to see that change.
So there is an inherent and a historical foundation, or an inherent and historically racialized foundation to immigration policy in this country. So in 1865 was when the 13th Amendment was ratified by the states of the United States. That was when slaves were officially freed by the federal government. And then in 1882, not even 20 years later, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed by Congress and signed into law by the president. The Chinese Exclusion Act specifically excluded Chinese people from immigrating here to the United States. That was a racially charged immigration policy. In 1965, the Civil Rights Act passed, and it coincided with the passing of the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act. Race and immigration policy in this country have always gone hand in hand. And it's been mentioned on this panel already, but there are just so many intersections between the Black community and between the Asian community and the Latino community, and Bea alluded to this just a second ago with the model minority myth. If you're not familiar, the model minority myth basically identified Asian Americans as the model minority, meaning that they are the type of minority that other minorities should strive for. And there are racialized underpinnings to that, too, specifically targeting the African American community. It came to fruition in the 1960s when the white community was painting Asian Americans in a particular light, saying, look at them, they're so great, they're so studious, they're so intelligent, they're so hardworking and dedicated. Why can you not be like them? So the systems that we have currently and have historically had have pitted our communities against each other, and that needs to stop now. And that's why I agree with Bea. I don't think our communities are doing enough to ally with each other, and this is the time to come out of our silos and start building those intersections and those bridges.
Another thing that I think is important to touch on is that just like there are members of the African American community, you're a builder and you support us, you're allying with us, but there are members of the African American community that have a disdain, I would say, against undocumented immigrants. Just like that exists, there are members of the undocumented immigrant community that hold racial prejudice against members of the African American community. And so our responsibility as allies to each other is to go back into our own communities and educate those people against the prejudices and the bias that they have.
A couple events that are coming up. So tomorrow night, Raymond mentioned the event that Advancing Justice has. Also in Atlanta, in South Atlanta, there is an event that Project South, in collaboration with other organizations, is hosting at a mosque called Masjid al-Mo'minun. If you've never been to a mosque, this is your opportunity. The panel is called Being Muslim in Trump's America. And so we're going to be talking about sort of historical systems of repression and surveillance targeting Black Muslims, among other Muslim communities and the current trends. And then on Saturday, we're having a Know Your Rights presentation in Clarkston. As I mentioned, as has been mentioned on this panel, communities in Clarkston have been targeted by the recent raids. So the Know Your Rights presentation on Saturday is from noon to 1:30. It's going to be at the Clarkston Community Center and is co-sponsored by the Somali American Community Association and other organizations. So please check out our website, projectsouth.org, for all that information.
We're going to have, so for anyone who actually signed up for tonight, I have your email in some way. I'm going to have all the panelists provide